there's a lot of things that go into ensuring a strong national security and protection for your people. That's more than just weapons or police or investigations, but yourself as a solid nation that has values that mean something to the people and that earns you respect from around the world. That's national security too. And certainly what's happening now is going to impact that aspect of the U.S. being protected and the U.S. being seen as a strong, confident nation to have trust in.
Hi, I'm Jo Crawford and welcome to Times Radio's Trump Report. You can listen to the Trump Report wherever you get your podcasts from, and don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Today, I'm joined by Jim Townsend, Senior Associate Fellow at RUSI and former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for European and NATO Policy. Thank you for joining me on the Trump Report today.
It's great to be here. Thanks.
So Trump has announced a travel ban on 12 countries. This includes Afghanistan, Iran, Libya, Republic of Congo. And he says that he's doing this to protect the US from those who intend to commit terrorist attacks, threaten national security. He also claims that these countries have historically resisted accepting deportees from the US. But on the other hand, we've got Amnesty International USA. They're saying that this ban is discriminatory. They call it racist. The Democrats say that this will further isolate the US on the world stage. What do you make of this?
Well, this is something that we saw in Trump's first term as well. He, whether it's racist or whatever is motivating him and his people to do this, it's unclear. The national security excuse is something he uses for a lot of things. He declares an emergency on the southern border, which gives him some powers to do some things to address what he sees as a national security threat. It's hard to imagine the national security threat coming from some of these countries, much less a lot of immigration coming from some of these countries. So there's something else going on here. You could say it's racist. You could say that it's certainly going to isolate the U.S. And further in terms of the world scene. So I'm afraid we're just looking at another round of embarrassing events coming out of the White House.
I mean, that's what I'm interested in hearing. Do we have any figures, statistics that can support Trump's claims that we're having this sort of threat, this national security threat from these countries that he's put on this travel list?
No, I tell you, I haven't seen anything like that. And normally that's what a leader or a country would do. As they announce something like this, they would say, then these are the reasons why. And they will lay out these statistics. They would talk about things that are understandable by the American people in this case, certainly the world would understand better. Why is he taking these actions? And he hasn't done it. It's just a list. And so it's hard to refute claims like, well, this is just racism or whatever it is. There doesn't seem to be any logic to it or any evidence to support this type of move.
So Trump began his travel ban announcement by referencing the attack that took place in Boulder, Colorado recently. He said that this was an example of why these restrictions were needed. It has to be noted that the attacker was identified as being Egyptian. Egypt isn't included on the list of banned countries. But if we do take a look at those countries that are included, a lot of countries that are affected by war, Myanmar, Haiti, several African nations. So on the one hand, we've got Trump claiming that this is for national security reasons to have this ban. But on the other hand, do you think that there's any national security risks that this travel ban could pose to the US?
Well, that's a very good point. And I think for some of these countries, I don't expect a retaliation or something coming from some of these very poor nations that have more trouble on their hands than dealing with Donald Trump. So I don't see that kind of impact on our national security. But, part of a nation's national security is also how they're viewed by the rest of the world. It's their values as a nation. There's a lot of things that go into ensuring a strong national security and protection for your people. That's more than just weapons or police or investigations, but yourself as a solid nation that has values that mean something to the people and that earns you respect from around the world. That's national security too. And certainly what's happening now is going to impact that aspect of the U.S. being protected and the U.S. being seen as a strong, confident nation to have trust in.
If we look at how Trump's last ban played out, how do you think that this impacted the US from a security perspective? Do you think that it did fulfill that promise that this will help to protect the nation?
I don't think so. I mean, this unless there was some obvious threat, imminent threat that you could touch, Haitians running in the streets. This is something that uh, this not happening, and it wasn't happening in the first term either. And the courts also, both the first term and now as well today, the courts in the United States are going to have to look at that travel ban and determine how lawful it really is. But in terms of having an impact on U.S. national security, keeping terrorists out or something like that, that's just not. It just doesn't. It didn't ring true in that first term, and it's not ringing true now. Some of those countries like Iran, North Korea, they have been on travel lists for years, so that's not necessarily new, and they were on those travel bans for good reasons. The addition of these other countries, it's just not. The reasons are just not apparent to anyone why some of these countries are on there.
Implementing the travel ban on Afghanistan is considered to be one of the more controversial elements of this ban. For example, it could prevent Afghans who worked with US soldiers from their time in the country from entering the US. But Trump says that because Afghanistan is now under Taliban control, it doesn't have appropriate screening and vetting measures. What do you make of this?
Well, it certainly impacts a lot of Americans, and particularly those in the services, like in the UK, who were in Afghanistan and saw the Afghan people in terms of helping them day by day, whether it's translators or whatever it might have been. The harsh criticism against Biden early after the Kabul debacle was that they didn't get the Afghans out enough, and so there have been, as you point out, efforts over time to get these pro-American Afghans who have been helpful to us, get them out of Afghanistan and to here. So by turning off the capability to do that, that's impacted in the United States. Probably Trump supporters who might have been supporting him, might have voted for him, are now saying, "What are you doing here?" So that is something that, again, it reflects on the United States as an ally. It reflects on the United States as we deal with problems around the world where we intervene and have to get involved. It impacts how we are considered by others. So it's going to have an impact on national security much more than the Taliban finding their way to the United States to do some type of act of terrorism.
How do you think this will have a wider impact on the US's relationship with Middle Eastern allies of the US?
Well, it will certainly have an impact. It did in that first term. And now, of course, we've broadened the list of countries. Again, it's so much of the hurt for the United States is in our reputation and the tarnishing of our values, and how the U.S. was once seen as a place that welcomed those coming out of turmoil or out of political persecution. This is something that is valuable to any nation, but the United States has kind of built its democracy on this ideal of being a last bastion to protect those that need help. And so that is something that is, whether it's in the Middle East or other places, it's really not just tarnished us, but it's made us less likely to be an ally to those who might want to make a peace deal, who might want to reach out to the United States for help on humanitarian issues, on trying to deal with guerrilla problems. There's a lot of effort that the U.S. has made in the past to help countries deal with internal problems. They've asked us to help, and we are there. Nations aren't going to do that anymore because dealing with the United States, at this point at least, is seen as something that could backfire on you. And that includes the NATO alliance, by the way. As allies, longstanding, who've worked with us at NATO, look at how we're dealing with countries around the world and I wonder if we're going to be next.
It's interesting to see that North Korea isn't on this travel ban list, but it was last time. Why do you think that is?
Well, I don't know. Is that a signal that maybe there's something up Trump's sleeve to pay a visit once again to North Korea, to see Kim? It's a very interesting question, and I think certainly in the coming days that question is going to be asked. We'll see what the administration says. Maybe it was oversight. Maybe they're so understaffed. Maybe they were working so fast that they just left North Korea off. I don't know, but it's going to be a very interesting thing to see what happens in the next couple of days as they try to answer that question.
I also don't think Syria is on the list either this time.
Well, and that's probably in keeping with the president's visit with the new Syrian leader, lifting sanctions off of Syria as we've done, trying to help usher them into a out of the darkness of the Assad days, and so I could see why they might not have been on that list as just another example of the U.S. trying to provide support. So that makes more sense than North Korea not being on that list.
I want to turn to Russia. We had that phone call between Trump and Putin, supposed to be around 75 minutes long. And Trump said that Putin will very likely respond to the Ukrainian drone strikes. What do you make of this? It sounds like more of an escalation than a de-escalation of this conflict.
Well, that's certainly where we are. No matter what Trump and others might think in terms of the possibilities of a peace agreement, neither side wants to go into a peace agreement in their heart of hearts, quite frankly. Both sides have a lot of fight in them. Certainly the Russians think they're going to be able to get what they've been trying to achieve for years now, which is control over Ukraine, at least calling the shots in Kyiv. I think Putin thinks he can get there through the battlefield, and he's going to continue to move that. And Zelensky, too. I mean, he has demonstrated time and again an audaciousness in terms of their military, and that they're able to stop a lot of the Russian offensive. So they're not ready to sit down and talk. So after this audacious attack on the airfields, certainly all eyes are on Moscow to see what they're going to do. Is there going to be some retaliation that really shows an escalation up to another level? And so there's some speculation, and I think it's something that there's something to it where the phone call to Trump from Putin saying, need to tell you, we're going to have to respond to this. That might be a bit of a signal saying this is going to be something big. What that is, I don't know. It could be some things that I don't even want to think about in terms of a response. So it could have been just a heads up to Trump that that's going to happen. What's interesting is Trump didn't sit there, from what I can tell, and try to get Putin off the ledge, saying, look, let's be chill about this. It sounds like Trump offered a very sympathetic ear to Putin saying, oh, I understand you've been attacked. This is terrible. You need to respond. I understand that. It sounded like it was much more sympathetic than one would have hoped, which was to push back on Putin and say, well, you're the one that invaded them, etc. Well, that's not going to happen, certainly. But it's something where this telephone call that went over a lot of issues, including Iran. It's interesting what the point of it was, and I have a feeling it was to give Trump a heads up that things are going to be happening in terms of retaliation.
And this is quite a different stance to Trump from a few weeks ago. He called Putin absolutely crazy or something along those lines, didn't he?
Well, he did, and seemed to be on the verge of saying to Putin, we're going to level some real sanctions on you, and I'm going to turn the spigot on for assistance to Ukraine until you move. You've embarrassed me. This is, but that kind of anger that we saw, it just disappears when he's on the phone with Putin. There's other things that override, any feelings like that, and one of them I think is the potential of business deals between the two. That was part of the conversation as well. Trump seemed to think that those were some good discussions on the trade and business opportunities, and that kind of thing is just it's catnip. It's catnip for Trump, and so he just gets all wobbly and hangs up the phone and says that was a great phone call. So you don't see this anger, this fear of being tapped along, and he goes back to the old Trump of trying to curry favor with Putin. So we've seen this before, and that sounds like that was the outcome of this phone call too.
So it's been confirmed that Trump will attend the NATO summit in The Hague later this month. I mean, what do you think we can expect to hear from Trump? But also, what sort of approach do you think he's going to take in terms of Russia and Ukraine?
Well, I know. It's just, it'll change 2 or 3 times before his plane lands in The Hague. But But the alliance is trying to keep all of the various trigger points to a minimum. They're going to make this a short summit, from what I can tell. They're going to not have the traditional NATO Ukraine commission meeting. They're going to do some things where Ukraine doesn't become the center of attention. The Vilnius summit was a great wake up call, if you will, for how NATO Ukraine issues can really disrupt that a summit. And so they're going to have it where Putin, where Trump can land, make a speech, maybe go to the plenary, have a press conference, and leave. So it's not going to be a long, drawn out, typical summit where you have a lot of interaction between heads of state and government and lots of meetings and the family photo and this type of thing. They're going to make it short and sweet with a minimal time of Trump being on the scene. It will be a focus on defense spending. He will say the things that we've heard him say in the past about allies have to do more. This is some good numbers that I'm seeing now in terms of defense spending, and you have me to thank for that. We're going to see that kind of thing. We'll see what he says about Ukraine. He might not say much if they don't give him an opportunity to do that. There might not be any statements coming out of NATO about Ukraine that we all have to agree on. It's by consensus, whatever they put out. And so maybe there won't be that kind of target. So I think what we're going to see is just hammering allies on doing more of the 5%. And then he's going to leave and go somewhere else. He might go back to the U.S., but a lot of times they go on to make another stop. I haven't heard that he will.
I mean, Pete Hegseth himself, he said that he thinks that NATO allies, they're near a consensus on signing up to Trump's defense spending target, going from 2% to 5% of GDP. I mean, do you think that is realistic?
Well, it is realistic depending on a lot of the caveats around that. So usually it comes with a time period, like we want you to reach that 3.5% of defense spending in 10 years or 5 years. And there's a lot of concern on and justified concern that that's just too long. But at the same time, as you point out, it's not realistic to see nations increase their defense budgets that much at the drop of a hat. And so remember, too, that the 5% figure that you're going to hear a lot about is made up of that 3.5% of GDP on defense, hardware, things that go boom. That's what the focus of 3.5 will be. And then 1.5, which is the infrastructure, military mobility, cyber, things that are defense related but can be paid for out of other budgets. They're going to kludge that together and come up with the 5%. But the 3.5 on defense spending itself, that's a jump from 2%. And a lot of nations haven't even reached the 2% yet either. So this is going to take time, unfortunately. But I think the point will be made that we don't have a lot of time, and nations have got to redouble their efforts to get there. And we've got to make sure that what that money is spent on is going to be the things that NATO says it's going to need. And they're going to talk about that also in June.
If we take the UK, for example, Prime Minister Keir Starmer, he hasn't committed to a specific date to up defence spending to 3%. How do you see that impacting the relationship between the UK and the US?
Well, it's interesting. The UK has historically been in a difficult position in that nations watch what the UK does. A lot of European nations, if the UK increases defense spending, they'll do the same thing. If UK doesn't do it, then other nations feel they can hide behind the UK and say, yeah, well, we can't either, and et cetera, et cetera. So there are a lot of eyes, including the United States, on what the UK does. The UK budget problems, the economic problems there, the SDR that is just going to get ready to come out. There are a lot of things that Keir Starmer is going to have to navigate around. And it's something that a lot of nations, including the United States, are having to wrestle with too. I think the relationship between the U.S. and the U.K. is pretty solid, and Keir Starmer has been saying all the right things, and I think the SDR is going in the right direction. This has been, and I've done a lot of the SDRs when I was in the Pentagon. This is going in the right direction. So I'm hopeful that time element will be shortened so that this could be done within the next few years and not over a 10-year period. That's the big question. I'm sure the Treasury is very focused on that. And I'm sure Hegseth will have something to say based on what Keir Starmer can come out with. It's tough. I don't envy him.
What sort of reaction do you think we can expect from Trump, from the White House, if NATO allies don't commit to this?
Well, if number one, I think they're going to do it because they're going to have a 10-year time horizon or something, and it's easy for a politician to kick the ball, down the way because this is going to belong to someone else. But if they can't do it, if they can't reach consensus and it becomes less, Trump will come down hard. I'm certain that is the kind of thing that's in the United States is bipartisan. It's red meat for the MAGA people. It's easy for Trump to remember what to say, and so if they can't reach consensus on it and it drops below that larger 5% bogey, if you will, if it drops below that they finally agree on, he will come down and say some harsh things. I don't think he's going to walk away, but he's going to scare everyone. And Hegseth, his attack dog, is going to really be scratching at the door. So, I think if they can't reach it, it's going to be the White House is not going to be silent on this.
Jim Townsend, thank you so much for joining me on the Trump Report today.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me.
You can listen to the Trump Report on wherever you get your podcasts from. And don't forget to subscribe to the Times Radio YouTube channel.